Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Parallel Systems broadcast. We have a fantastic guest with us today who I am sure needs no introduction to you all. It's Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading and very popular precious metals expert, Lynette Zang. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Parallel Systems broadcast, Lynette.
I'm very happy to be here, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for joining us, Lynette. It's a fantastic honor for me. And I thought, Lynette, we'd get straight into it and maybe just talk a little bit about CBDCs because it's something that you've been talking about a lot on your own channel. And I'd love to get your take on how likely you think it is we see a CBDC in the West in the coming 4, 5, 6 years. How close do you think we are to seeing one rolled out in a Western nation, Lynette?
I think we're very close to it. And I don't think it's going to take another 4 or 5 years, frankly. I think it's just going to take the next really good crisis. So frankly, they've been working on this for a while, even though they say, oh, well, we're still thinking about it. Well, they're already running tests. I mean, most central banks actually have CBDC programs in the US. They're already running their tests on it. So, and we all have FedNow accounts here. So I think the next crisis, they will use that opportunity to inject a whole bunch of CBDCs in for the population and trying to get them to use the CBDCs. So I think we're very close.
Do you think it's possible, Lynette, to actually apply a CBDC to the current system, or is it the case that the current system has to collapse first so they can usher it in?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we need a big crisis. You know, the current system is based upon debt, right? So in order to use the same parameters for the new system, they would have to burn off through hyperinflation all of the debt. So the current system is done. It's finished. It actually died in 2008. That's why you see all those references of, wow, this is like it was back in 2007, 2008, or like it was in the 70s and 80s, or like it was in the 40s or even the 30s. And what I've only seen the Financial Times actually take it to that next level. What they never say after that is that during all of those different periods of time, the one common thread was that we were transitioning into a new monetary system, a new financial system. And this time is no different because there's officially no purchasing power left in the currency. In the US, it's about 3 cents. In Mexico, it's not even a penny. And I'm sure that's true all around the world. The system is done. So this next crisis, they'll use that to try and usher in the new system.
Now, you mentioned hyperinflations there, Lynette, and we've seen hyperinflations countless times throughout history, but what we've never seen is the entire global financial system go bankrupt at the same time. And I'm just wondering, what does that even look like? What do you envision happening once we get to this reset moment?
Well, first of all, we are so incredibly interconnected. But if you go back to the Depression in the 1930s, that was actually a global depression at that time as well, though we were not as interconnected as we are now. So, you know, the way that I see it is, frankly, a major global hyperinflationary or hyperdeflationary, right? People think that deflation is different than inflation when in reality, it's just they're the same coin. It's just the opposite side. And I think it's ugly. I think we will see a tremendous amount of, I'm sorry to say this, I really am, depopulation, because food becomes the single biggest issue for people during these transitions. And we have been trained away. I mean, during the World War II, we had victory gardens. People had gardens, right? And they could survive. But we've been trained away from that. So I think there is a lot of violence that we're going to see because when people are hungry and hopeless, they make choices they would not otherwise make. I think we could see a global revolution, and I actually kind of hope that that's what happens because we need a much more fair system. And if those that are in power now are able to create that new system and retain control of it, we're not going to get a very fair system for most. But yeah, I can see a lot of, I mean, it's not a pretty world. And unfortunately, I have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are going to be living in that world. So that's why I work as hard at this as I do, because it's just not right to destroy people's lives the way these central bankers and governments seem to think they have the right to do. It's just not right.
No, I completely agree, Lynette. And, you was one of the people who actually inspired me to carry out that vision in our life, Lynette. We moved to a farm, we grow our own food.
Wow.
And I remember years ago sat watching you, and I completely agreed and saw the same things you were saying. So you was a big inspiration for us doing that. And now we live that life. So it can be done. But it's not easy, is it, Lynette? Growing your own food, there is a big learning curve to all of these things. And I'm just wondering, what advice could you give to somebody who's maybe just figuring it out now and feels maybe the train's left? Is there anything that we can start doing right now to get prepared for this coming future?
Absolutely. My mantra. First of all, I'm really honored that I've been able to inspire you. So thank you very much for that. But how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So if you take the whole mantra, food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. And this is the way I did it. I would say, okay, where do I feel the most vulnerable? Now, I'd really been building my physical gold and silver position for quite some time because I came to ITM in 2002 after the formulas had confirmed that we were at the end of this experiment, because I've been studying currency life cycles since '87. And there are always these repeatable patterns that we see every time. So I already had my foundation of gold and silver. But in 2008, when the system died, that's when I went, holy crap. I didn't think I was going to see this in my lifetime, but I'm watching it unfold in my lifetime. So the first thing I did, I was living in a little 2-bedroom condo, getting ready to retire and just kind of travel and play. And then all of that changed, and it's just a half an acre. And I actually am in dead central Phoenix. You could not be more dead central than I am. But I have children, and I knew my children weren't going to go with me anywhere like that. And so I said, okay, this is where I'm going to make my last stand. And I think that's part of it. You have to decide, like you're doing it on a farm in Poland, this is where I'm going to make my last stand. And you look at that mantra and you say, okay, where do I feel the most vulnerable? And then you work on that area a little bit. Whichever mantra piece it is. So if you haven't started anything, you need a foundation of good money, because at least then you can potentially buy other things that you need. But plant a garden. If you're not going to have the ability to plant a garden, because not everybody has any land, and I don't have a lot, but I dug up my lawn and put in a food forest. But if you can't do that, then there's survival food. There's long storage food. You go to the store and you buy an extra bag of beans and an extra bag of rice. So, you start to fill those holes. We don't have the luxury of time. I started back in 2002, but I started my farm in 2010. So here we are. And like you said, there's a very, very long learning curve. So for people that don't have that time, first of all, the sooner you start to develop those skills. But developing community can help people fill those voids that they can't fill. That's why community is so important, because everybody brings with them a different set of experiences and skills. So like I can lay irrigation because of my experience in this farm. Do I want to lay irrigation? No, I don't. But if I had to, could I do it? Yes, I could. So you have to also put yourself out there and start learning new skill sets. And community activities are frankly a perfect way to do it. Maybe there's a community garden, or maybe like I started on this gardening journey where I actually started to get somewhere through what's called meetup groups that would just go into different people's homes, not into the homes, but they would put in the gardens. They would dig ponds out and put in tilapia, which you can eat, and things like that. So yeah, I would say you want to get your gold and silver foundation so that you have good money, but you need the rest. You need food, water, energy security, as well as anything physical or any skill sets that you have are barterable. Wealth preservation, and a lot of that can be accomplished through community, because we are running out of time. We don't have that. I don't believe we have another 10 years or 5 years, to be honest with you.
I loved what you said about community, because I say the same to people too. There's so much that you can do with a community, and even if you don't have a lot of money, just knowing people, so long as you've got some skills you can bring, people will invite you into the fold and help you out. One thing that I wanted to ask you as well, Lynette, was about your recent video on silent wars, because it seems to me like we're in this era of crisis, and every crisis seems to take us actually closer and closer to the pre-stated goals before the crisis for things like Agenda 2030, Great Reset, call it whatever you want. But we seem to be going there at a very quick rate, and the crisis is speeding it up. And I'm just wondering, I'd love to get your opinion on where are we actually heading? Are we heading to complete dystopia? Is there anything we can do to stop it at this point? Or is it just a case of preparing the best we can?
Well, I mean, if enough people understand what's happening, then I do believe, and I have a lot of hope, that yes, we can stop this. We can have an impact on what this next iteration looks like with a much more fair system. So, I mean, that is my hope. I do think that it's quite possible that we see a global revolution, because this rapid inflation, and then some of the tools that some of the countries are using to control their population is starting to push back, even in China. I mean, what happened in China really actually gives me a lot of hope, because that's the most controlled, well, I don't know if it's the most, but it's really right up there with the most surveilled and most controlled economy. And, they just had really radical about face in policy. Why? Because their population actually started coming together and protesting and saying, no. And that was incredible to me, that they went from the lockdown mentality to completely open just like that. So that gives me a lot of hope for the future. But we also have to remember that we vote with our wallets and our purses. So if you keep all of your wealth inside of the system, that the fiat money system, the government debt-based, disgusting, convoluted, corrupt system, then you're voting for more of the same. If you pull your wealth out and you put it into good money and all the other things that we've been talking about, that's your vote. So we need roughly 3% of the population to vote this way. I know this is not a popular view among most people probably, but I don't think that the advent of cryptocurrencies were a very, big surprise. That, wow, Bitcoin was born in January of 2009 at the same time that quantitative easing, so just all of this flipping money printing, was born in March of 2009. Because The last stat that I saw was in the US, 16% of the population, of the adult population, had in some way, shape, or form encountered cryptocurrencies. That's adoption. That is a high enough level to adopt the new CBDC. And think about all of the money that went into those cryptocurrencies and are still there or not, as it be. All of that, because it's the same mentality, right? They're trying to get out of the system. They're trying to get out of harm's way. How much of that wealth would have gone into physical gold that is outside of the system, that runs no counterparty risk and is actually invisible to central bankers? So, they know how to make these transitions by keeping things looking as normal as possible. If you really want to fight what's happening, you don't have to go to the streets. Just buy physical silver and gold. Pull your wealth out of their system. Don't make it easy to rob you.
Yeah, if everyone went out tomorrow, Lynette, and pulled their currency from the bank, by the afternoon, it would be all done and over with. The system would have collapsed. Of course, they'd stop you from withdrawing the money long before because they control those banks, and those deposits are now loaned to the bank. However, that is as simple as it is. The system is a Ponzi scheme, isn't it? And if you take your money out of it, it just collapses.
Huge.
And one thing that I've been noticing over here in Europe, Lynette, and I'd love to get your take on what's happening in America, if there's something similar going on, I aren't sure, but we've got a war on gold going on right now. It's paired up with the war on cash. They are reducing the ability to use cash, gold, and cryptos, all under the heading of anti-money laundering. And of course, this is nothing new. The war on cash and gold has been going on a long time, but it seems to me they're really ramping this up right now. And I'm just getting the feeling like they're trying to trap people and cut the exits off. I'm wondering if you've seen anything similar in the US.
Oh, 100%. Because a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. So people get caught up in numbers. That's nominal confusion, right? Which is about perception management. If they can manage how you perceive things, then they can manage how you move forward. So we know really, since the beginning of this grand experiment, the price of gold and the price of silver has been suppressed. But the way that it works is like a spring, right? So if you keep your hand on a spring and then you remove your hand, it shoots in a direction. Yes, they have been manipulating and suppressing the price and encouraging other things, right? Encouraging cryptocurrencies, creating a very, very fertile soil to develop that, until they came out and said, basically there was a recent report from the International Monetary Fund that is, and I think, and the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, that went basically private cryptocurrencies, bad. Central bank cryptocurrencies, good. And the way that they're going to pitch it, and they've said this, so these are not my words, these are theirs, that, we are definitely in an inflationary environment and headed into a hyperinflationary environment. I think that's already started. So the way that they're going to pitch it and sell it to us is, if you give central banks buy into the cryptocurrency regime, there won't be any more inflation. Heck no, there'll be deflation, because they also say once we have that, there are no limits to how low you can push interest rates. Well, what does that mean? That means they're now going to attack your principal because they've already gotten all your purchasing power. So yes, I am seeing it here, because if we think, well, you're over there and we're over here, guess what? This is a very small world. We're all in it together. We're all going through the same thing. It isn't different this time. And I would, look, you want to be protected from hyperinflation or hyperdeflation? Own gold and silver. That's it. That's what's going to protect you. And why? Because they have the broadest base of functionality. Both of them, they have never, the qualities that gold and silver possess has never been able to be duplicated in a lab. So they are used in every single sector of the global economy. Well, guess what? If you have the broadest base of function and therefore the broadest base of buyer, and you're going into a currency collapse, look, over time, demand has gone up, demand has gone down. But if you have the broadest base of buyer, you can't go to zero because there's always a buyer for these assets. Not the paper assets, not the spot market, not the stupid ETFs that is a trust and a diminishing asset, but for physical, anything physical, there's a finite amount. Unlike anything digital, where easy to be an unlimited amount. That's a button push with very minimum effort. This takes time, effort, energy to pull it out of the ground, mine it, and have it functioning in all different areas of the global economy.
And it seems like a given now, Lynette, that the next monetary system is going to put gold right back into the heart of it. We've already got a really good idea of what that's going to look like because of what China and Russia have been setting up with this new system. It's going to have other commodities too, but I see over time gold rising to the top of that commodity basket purely because all the other commodities are going to need replenishing constantly. So does that mean that we're going to see the West forced into deploying their gold reserves at some point and maybe even revaluing that gold?
Well, deploying it, I'm not so sure. And you made a point, earlier that this is a Ponzi scheme, right? And so Ponzi schemes require confidence. And we've been watching the layers of confidence bank to bank with interbank lending in 2008, central bank to central bank in 2015 with the Swiss surprise last August, market to bank when they gave up forward guidance. There's only one piece of confidence left, and that's public confidence. And they know that. When they created this system, they knew lots of things, but they knew two key things. Number one, people marry the legal money of the state. So if they can keep things looking as normal as possible, hence the importance of the adoption rate, well, okay, then they can make that transition and nobody realizes it until it's way too late if they ever even do realize it. I was there in 1971. If you look at a bill, and you can pull this up, if you look at a dollar bill in 1970 or 1969 and the next one after August, brand new bill, September 1971, they are almost, not quite, but they are almost identical. So the normal person didn't notice. I didn't notice. I didn't realize the change, right? So they want us to think that nothing has changed when in reality, everything has changed. But when the public loses confidence in the currency and the system, that's when we will have the hyperinflation. And ultimately, they will lop off zeros. They will reset the currency system globally. On average, that typically happens 3 times. But Venezuela is already on the 4th time. So maybe it'll be 4 or 5 times. Maybe it'll be 1 or 2 times. When the population ultimately loses confidence in this Ponzi scheme, then in order to get that confidence back, they put a component of gold in the new system. They won't do it until all of the debt is burned off and all of the wealth that can be transferred is transferred. That's why when part of the whole strategy, and it's just based on repeatable patterns, is to establish what's called dynastic wealth. which is wealth that lasts in families at least 300 years. So you can think of the King of England or the Queen of England, right? And you can think, what do they have? Wow, they have real estate, they have gold, and they have rare collectibles. This is the kind of wealth that can transfer through the generations. But arguably, the gold money is the most important part, because if you have the other two, like land, you always have property taxes, right? It's an immovable, right? So they know that, and they say, oh, this is a movable property. We can just keep raising the taxes. If you don't pay the taxes, you're going to lose the property. So gold helps you have the ability to always pay that property and therefore retain control of the property. You know, I hate to say this, but we are fast moving to a point where all titles are held on tokens in your wallet. Okay. The more convenient it is to have your equity and your wealth near you, and the more that we've been trained to think short term, and be consumer driven. Gee, I want that boat. Well, gosh, I've got my equity right on my phone. It's just a little bit. I still have a lot more. Before you know it, you've spent your equity, and now your home is owned by somebody in China or somewhere else. So what they want is they want things to happen faster and faster and easier. In order to do that, it has to be easier and easier and easier. You know, think about it. When you had to carry around these 1 ounce coins, you know, they kind of get heavy in your pocket. So, hey, there, I have one, but I don't have one on the desk. But here's a gold certificate, right? That is so much more convenient and so much easier to carry paper bills than, this big heavy coin. Okay. But don't worry, because you can go to the bank and you can convert this into this whenever you want, until you couldn't, right? Then all of a sudden you couldn't, but you have this. But I mean, really, why do you want to count out all of that money? Why? You've got a checking account, you've got a debit card, you've got a credit card. That is so much more convenient. But if I had to go up and everything I'm buying, I'm counting out that money, I'm more aware of what I'm spending, aren't I? When I'm using a credit card or a debit card, that's so much more convenient, so much easier. I'm not as aware of how much I'm spending. Well, guess if you don't have to open your wallet, I mean, most people carry their phones, they're with them all the time. All of your wealth held here. If I wanted to pull the equity out of my house right now, I would have to apply for another mortgage and do all that stuff, right? It's going to take time and effort. But if your equity is held there and you just have immediate access to it, I mean, we are being set up to own nothing. I'm pretty sure you won't be happy. But if you make that choice, even though you were nudged into doing it, even though they employ the most brilliant psychological minds to nudge you into doing that, who are you going to complain to? Who are you going to blame? You're going to blame yourself. Even though that was the plan all along. It's disgusting to me. It's absolutely disgusting to me.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it feels like we've sleepwalked into a lot of it through exactly what you said, Lynette, this convenience, promising us it'll be easier. Most people now hold their music digitally, their books digitally. We don't actually own nothing. They could be switched off at any moment. But once you get to the money and they can switch that off remotely, then you're essentially a slave, aren't you? That's pretty much the end of the line. There's no going back from there.
Exactly. I mean, we saw what happened in Canada. And I mean, who thinks of Canada as a dictatorship. You don't, right? And hey, those truckers that were protesting, a legal protest, boom, cut off from all of their money. Not only were they cut off, but anybody that supported them donated $5, boom, cut off. I'm telling you, that should have been eye-opening for every single person on this planet. Wouldn't be so shocked when China does it, but when Canada does it, that's pretty shocking.
Yeah, I agree. How long do you think it might be, Lynette, till we get to that crucial moment where it just starts to fall apart? It felt like last year we had rumblings a few times. We saw Credit Suisse. Well, we saw Switzerland get some secret bailout where they did swap lines with the US. We saw all kinds of weird things happening, but it never seemed to quite collapse. Do you think this year could be the year? Do you think that we're that close?
Yeah, I do think we're that close. And I think we're that close because of the biggest experiment that they've ever attempted, which, in the 80s, they created the LIBOR, London Interbank Offer Rate, and that's an interest rate benchmark that has been embedded into every single contract on the planet, right? And this is the only thing that has no contract to it, physical gold in your possession. So everything else has been hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of contracts have this embedded. And coming up June 31st of this year, 2023, every single contract is supposed to be transitioned into the new benchmark, which is different in a few different countries, but the key benchmark would most likely be the SOFR, which is the US benchmark. And no matter what they've done with their little accounting gimmicks and tricks, they have not been able to have that new benchmark track like the old benchmark. And there's still over 610 trillion in notional value. And I say that with air quotes around it because nobody admittedly really knows the value that's at risk because of all of the funny accounting and the creative financial engineering. So I think that we could definitely see a huge crisis. And I could be wrong. It could be a big fat nothing burger, but I don't think so. So yeah, I think we could see a crisis before June 30th of this year. And we're in February. We're marching toward March pretty quick.
Yeah. Last year we saw in the UK a number of pension funds almost go bust due to their exposure to derivatives. And I was warning people about that years ago, and that was the first incidence of it. They bailed them out, of course, but that's going to come back around. There's derivatives all throughout the system. And I'm just wondering, Lynette, what's your advice to somebody who's got their wealth? I mean, I know you're going to say gold, but is there anything else we could be doing if you've got your pension tied up in this system, you've got future entitlements you're expecting, you've got bank deposits? What's the chances of people having them in, say, 5-10 years' time?
I think they will look a whole lot different than they do right now. I mean, the system will collapse. So whatever wealth you're holding in there, you better not be counting on it. It kind of goes back to the mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter, because these are the things that we need to sustain a standard of living. And yeah, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that can't just pull that out, like the pensioners. In this country, if you've got a 403B and you're still working for that company, there's nothing you can do. So what I really recommend is to have a truly diversified portfolio. We've been taught to think, well, if you have stocks and you have bonds, then you have a diversified portfolio. But look at what happened last year, where they're all synchronized. It doesn't matter what you have. If it's in this garbage, so you need to properly diversify your portfolio. And right now you have, stocks and bonds that are at really nosebleed fiat money valuations, and you have gold and silver that is severely undervalued. That's going to flip-flop. particularly when they need to regain that confidence. So, I mean, we have formulas that are based on those historic norms so that you know how much gold do I really need to protect my pension, to pay off my mortgage, to make sure that I can pay my property taxes. These are the things that you're going to need to have a plan about. And that's why I created this strategy for myself. But I'm lucky because at ITM, we have a lot of very smart, experienced people. And so we've all worked on it together to make it even better. But, you know, you got it. That's what you have to do. You have to make sure you can, you know, feed yourself is especially important because food becomes the single biggest issue for most people. You can't live without food. You can't live without water. So what are you doing to secure at least those two basic things? Comes back to the community again. But your foundation has got to be in good money because whatever you're holding in fiat is going away.
Yeah, for sure. It really is a case of, even if people think these crises are somewhat orchestrated, they could still wind up with supply chains that break down, no food, no access to, like you said, to water. And maybe they get something wrong. You know, these people are not clever people, Lynette. They're very good at destroying things, but they're not so good at building things. It could quite easily go wrong. And again, you could have cities without food for weeks, even months on end. And what would that look like? That'd be chaos.
Well, look at Venezuela, right? They're in the middle of it. You've got 90% of the population that is in abject poverty. And then the government comes out and says, well, raise some backyard chickens, maybe put in a little garden. Well, you know, they trained us away from that kind of living because they wanted us more dependent on the system. And the system is a just-in-time system. So, you know, we're used to getting things immediately. And I think we've all seen that is not really the way things work anymore, right? I mean, I've been waiting for my flipping windows for 2 years. Okay, because of supply chain issues. But here's the other thing. And I mean, I understand it, but I find it really fascinating that the assumption that people always seem to make is that the powers that be want the same thing to keep going on. They want everything to just stay status quo. We'll kick the can down the road. We'll kick the can down the road. Well, if there's no purchasing power left, which means they have to attack principle, the system doesn't work anymore. It's at the end of the road. There's no more kicking the can. So what if, just suppose that this next crisis is engineered to make that transition? So no, they don't want to kick the can down the road anymore because they know they're at the end. Maybe that's why global central banks have bought more gold than they have since 1967, when what was happening then? A monetary regime shift. So maybe this is being orchestrated and they're going to attempt to control this. And that's where our opportunity lies if enough people vote with their purses and get what they can out of the system and into sound money and into those other pieces that support a reasonable standard of living.
Yeah, as worrying and as, you know, some people say it's scary what's happening, but I also remind people, like you just did, Lynette, you put it beautifully, that this is also a huge opportunity. The beast system that's been controlling us for thousands of years, the same people keep reenacting the same system. It's that window of opportunity now where actually it's going to fall apart. And they're terrified that they're not going to have control over the next system. Now, I've never seen so many people talking about these things. I've never seen it. And that's because of the internet. That wasn't there the last time we had the financial reset. So this is also a huge opportunity. And for people like you who are building communities and getting themselves ready, even if that system does come to pass, I think it's going to fall apart and our parallel system could thrive, couldn't it?
It could. It could. So, I mean, I remember and you just gave me chills. So that's always a good sign that what you just said is absolutely accurate. And, I mean, I remember it was July of 2007, and I happened to be on a sibling weekend in Vancouver. And I didn't usually, and I still don't, talk about these things with my family because they don't want to hear it. Just like, I mean, a lot of people experience that. But there was a technical piece that had just happened with the dollar. So I didn't even want to go on this weekend, but I was already committed to it, and I did. And I remember being told, oh, you're just a doom and gloomer. The economy's the best that it's ever been. Because I'm sitting here going, look, this just happened. I'm scared. I'm going to go home and tell mom she's got to pull her money out of the stock market. So I don't know. Do I seem like a doom and gloomer to you?
Absolutely not. No, in fact, like I said, you was a huge inspiration to me and my wife to setting up that self-sufficient life. So absolutely not.
Right. And people don't realize the opportunities that lie ahead. I mean, look at the current prices on real estate. They are outrageous. Even though they're starting to come down, that was targeted for reflation. So this is what happens. Gold is down here. Real estate is down here. That's going to flip-flop. And I've done studies on, 25 ounces of gold, buying entire city blocks, buildings and all. So now you can take this, convert it into income producing assets that you cannot outlive and can be passed down to generations so that your children, I mean, so much of what I do is for the children. I mean, I'm 68. I think I'm going to live to be 100, but I'm in the last third of my life. Let's face it. I am. I'm not going to be around that much longer. But I have children. I have grandchildren. Someday I hope to have great-grandchildren. And if we sit back and do nothing and just allow them to take control, what choices will our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren into the future, what choices will they have? They won't have any. But if you have really sound money when the valuations shift, because that's how they do it, they revalue the currency overnight. I mean, Lebanon, it went up, it's not done yet, but it just went up, 1,300% over in that overnight revaluation. They held it down forever, and then boom, 1,300%. Now you have opportunities to grow that dynastic wealth and make sure that your children, your grandchildren, all the generations to come have choices. That's what it's really about. It's having the freedom of choice and having freedom. I want my children, all my children, I want them to have those choices. I want them to have that freedom. I want them to have the ability to dream and have the ability to make those dreams come true.
Yeah, I'd echo that sentiment too, Lynette. And, not all of us were born with huge inherited wealth when it comes to the financial aspect. Not all of us were born with millions in the bank or property or land, but we all inherited great wealth, and that's freedom, the most important wealth there is. And it's up to us to pass on that wealth. We can't squander it. If we do, then we're destroying future generations. So I completely agree, Lynette. One final question, Lynette, and this one comes from one of my patrons who's a part of the community that we're growing over here. And she wanted to ask you about your exciting project with this bug out location that you're making. I know you're creating this off-grid community place where you can actually go to. So maybe you could update our listeners as to how it's going.
Well, I actually just got a video, and I don't know when Edgar's going to post them, but probably within 2 weeks, my hothouses will be completed, which is like, that's the one thing that I didn't have up there was a good food source, even though we could hunt and things like that. So that's going to be completed. And that means that I will now have, not that there isn't more that we can constantly be doing, but if it, God forbid, poi poi poi, but if something happened today, I could accommodate 40 people up at that bug out location in safety with food, water, energy, security, because it's a very secure location, community and shelter, and even some barterability. Because now we're going to be able to grow. I have a lot of long storage food up there that, because if we end up there all at once, like I'm not really going to grow out all of the gardens right now because I don't need to. But it'll take a little while to get food production up to snuff. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I've got good solar up there, but we're actually right now even expanding it and reinforcing it because while it works for the main house and the guest cottage and the garden hothouse, kitchen hothouse that's right by there, if I had 40 people in that house at once, I might run a little shy. So yeah, I mean, how do you eat an elephant? You go, okay, where am I the most vulnerable? Let's get that at least partially done, get that into place. Now what's next? Oh, okay, well, we've done good with the solar here, but we could use more. So it's really exciting. And you'll, to your viewers or to any viewers, you can find out more about that on Beyond Gold and Silver, which deals with all of those other pieces. Have we put anything up on the hothouses on Beyond Gold and Silver? I'm asking Edgar because he's the one that manages that piece. I have no idea. I just they point me in a direction. I just go in that direction.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the description, of course, Lynette.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, that
yes,
sounds like
I love
such a
it
cool
up there.
project.
It's great.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. And what is that based in Forest, Lynette? Are you like, is this just like literally
Yes.
out the way as far as you can get?
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's based in Forest, and I'm at the very top of the mountain. I have 41 acres. Yes, so it's very defensible and it's very hard to get there. We have lots of extra tires in storage up there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fantastic way of looking at it, Lynette. It's like you've got to find that highest ground you can, so you need to get a safe location and think about all that stuff, but you also need to at some point say, I'm not running away from this because it's going to catch up with you wherever you go. So find that higher ground. Could be even in the city where you live. Just do the best you can, isn't it? Do the best you can.
Well, exactly. I mean, I fortified this house because up until March, April of 2020, I thought that this was going to be where I would make my last stand. But we had riots not that far from where I live and not that far from where my daughters live. And I went, oh man, I have discovered the hole in my personal strategy. But so you just want to make sure that you have all of those things. I will say one of the very best things that I did as far as security is concerned, and I have layers of security, like I have layers of food, layers of energy, but I put on security shutters on my house. I already had them up there, but that was about fire mitigation. So I have the security shutters on my house. I can lock those down and nobody's getting in. Nobody. And I use them all the time. I use them daily. But, let's assume for one moment that none of this happens. Let's just make that assumption. Well, guess what? I have a fabulous vacation retreat for my family and I. Booty, hooty, Rudy, Manooty.
I concur with everything that you've said today, Lynette. I think it was a fantastic interview. Thank you, Lynette, for the great interview and for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure.
This was my pleasure too, Mike. Anytime. This was great.
I will leave your links in the description, Lynette, and of course, people will be able to come across and check out your off-grid bug out location and also the links to ITM trading too. I'm sure everyone knows where they are anyways because you're very popular, but I'll put them there anyways. And one final time, Lynette, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.